A very good afternoon to one and all present here. We, the students of Faculty of Planning, would like to extend a warm welcome to our FP family of 50 years, both online and in person. We're very honored to be a part of such a great legacy and extremely fortunate to be a part of Faculty of Planning on its 50th year. What you left behind is not just what is engraved in the FP building, but also what it is woven into the lives of every succeeding batch and has shaped the Faculty of Planning. To take forward this legacy, the student body has come up with the idea of planting a banyan tree as a symbol of knowledge watered by the roots of Faculty of Planning, that is the founding members, deans, teaching and non-teaching staff, and the alumni. This banyan sapling will later be planted in the south lawns, where it grows along the future batches of Faculty of Planning as they take roots. We would request the dignitaries to water the banyan sapling and nurture its growth, as they have nurtured many lives at the Faculty of Planning. We request Professor Christopher Benninger to please come on stage. Professor Prem Pangotra, Professor Barjor Mehta, Professor Shivanand Swami, Professor Utpal Sharma, Professor Darshini Mahadevia, Professor Vidyadhar Phatak, and Professor Mona Iyer. We would also request Professor Bimal Patel, Professor Trideep Surut, and our registrar, Anita Hiranandani, to come on stage and water the sapling. Thank you for being the first to water the plant and nurture its growth. The current and the future batches will make sure to take care as it grows to a full-fledged tree. We request you to kindly take your seats on the dais. We thank you for being the first to water the plant and nurture its growth. The current and the future batches will make sure to take care of it as it grows to a full-fledged tree. We request you to kindly take your seats on the dais. We now request the President of the Student Council, Zoya Kidwai, and the Academic Secretary, Saurabh Sharma, to, as representatives of the student body, to please felicitate the guests with the SEP stole and souvenir. Thank you, Zoya and Saurabh, for felicitating the guests on behalf of Faculty of Planning. Now, we would like to invite Professor Madhu Bharti for a welcome note.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. All the people who are on the dais and all the students and the other alumni and the guests who are here with us today. Today is indeed a historic day. And this day, it is with great pleasure that I invite all of you people to start the celebrations of FP50. FP50 that we are celebrating today is actually the celebrations we started about few months back at the Convocation 2022. And we will take it further till the end of the year. This celebration marks the journey that the previous known as School of Planning, which started in 1970, 71, 72. Today, Christopher was telling us that the idea started in 71, but what we know is that 72 was the foundation of FP50, of School of Planning. And from School of Planning, now we are the Faculty of Planning, and we are celebrating 50 years. What started as a small School of Planning with about 15 to 20 students, and now we are having 450 students in the Faculty of Planning. And we have undergraduate, we have the graduate program, and we have the PhD program. All these, the UG, PG, and the PhD programs, together it makes the Faculty of Planning. During this journey from 1972 to now, we have seen many ups and downs at the Faculty of Planning. We have seen the issues, what today morning we were talking with All India Council of Technical Education, we were issues with other government institutions, and also how we overcame all those hurdles and emerged stronger and kind of a very well-known and a stable institution in the country. Today, the faculty and the students, while we are celebrating this FP50, you can find students and alumni from the Faculty of Planning everywhere in leading positions in the country as well as globally, and any city, any town you go, you will find support and you will find people who are working in the planning domain and are leaders in their domain. The richness of the program, the richness of this connect comes from what the alumni have contributed to the department. It comes from the strength of the alumni that whenever you have you need any expert lectures, you need any guest lectures, you can call up your friends and you can call up alumni and they will come and support for guest lectures as well as juries and other events at the center. Today, we have the privilege of having some of our previous deans and people who had contributed to starting this program, and we will be tracing the journey from then to now. And this journey that we will be tracing today and that we'll be talking about today, I'm sure it's going to be very exciting and very interesting journey. And for that, ladies and gentlemen, I say please tighten your seat belts and mute your phones so that you undivided attention to what is happening today in the auditorium. I'm sure this journey will be enriching for each of us, whether we are the faculty at the program, whether we are the students at the program, or we have graduated and moved out from here. With this, I would like to invite and request Professor Tridip Surud, who is the provost of the university, of CEPT University, to help us and to give the opening remarks and also guide today's program further. Thank you. Please, sir.
Thank you and namaste. It's in some ways appropriate punishment for a historian to be part of an event which looks at the past. But I think it's a very, very significant moment in the institutional history of India. Rarely a moment comes in India when a modern institution is able to look back upon 50 years of its work with pride, with a sense of accomplishment, and also look towards the future with hope. And I say it's rare because many institutions that we founded in the 19th century and the 20th century didn't survive to see 50 years. Didn't survive, nothing in India closes down. So in that sense, they are there, but its purpose, its vibrancy, its life is lost within 50 years. And that's been a sad part of our institutional journey. CEPT, when it began as part of what all of us know as the Great Ahmedabad Effervescence, great experiment. And it was an experiment not in just creating institutions, it was an experiment in imagining a new India. The idea really was that if we are to find our place as a nation, as a people, as a society, and as a nascent nation state, we had to equip our young with both a worldview and capacities which would allow them to function as citizens, but as also members of a society, of an economy, of a profession. So the Ahmedabad experiment was very vital. It was an act of hope, it was an act of great imagination, and CEPT really is very fortunate to be part of that experiment. By 1970s, when the Faculty of Planning is established, or it's even thought of, some of that hope has begun to fade. Professor Rajakrishna, some of you would, people of, Christopher of course would remember him very well, spoke with great sadness of what he called the Hindu rate of growth. Where the population rose higher, the rate of population growth was higher than the rate of economic growth. We had developed deep suspicion about our economy. We had developed deep distrust of our industry. We had shackled it. Right? And very soon, we were about to develop very deep suspicion of democratic processes also. It's in that period that the Faculty of Planning gets established. So some of its journey, some of its trajectory, its early struggles are rooted in its times. Most institutions are rooted in their times. Some of them are able to transgress them, transcend them, and Faculty of Planning has been one which has really kept pace with what's happened. If you look back in the last 50 years, things have changed. India has changed. We are no longer suspicious of the market. Market has also learned to function with Indian society. It's changing its processes, it's changing its assumptions to be part of how we behave in a marketplace, how we trade, how we understand money, what our attitude to profits are. Market has adjusted to us. We have also embraced markets and its benefits. We've also become less reliant upon the government in large sectors of our lives. But what has been fundamental change, really, is a change that we have rarely commented upon, which is a change in mentality, in our mental attitudes. Just one instance is that we've stopped being suspicious of the city. There is, if you really look at the first 30, 40 years of India, or even in the early 20th century, certainly late 19th century, the journey that we made to the city was a very ambiguous journey. It was fraught with apprehension. There was also the idea of, there was aspiration, there was hope, but the city was always seen as something that ensnarls us, something that will lead us astray from our path. And what we've really done in the last 40 years is, in many ways, unshackled us from that ambiguity, from deep apprehension about the fact of the city. And that's really something that we as an institution and you as community of students will have to grapple with. I'm not here to give you a very bad history of political economy of India, and that's not what my purpose is. What I wish to do is to say that when we look back today, and all the people who have led this institution will look back in the, it's called reflections. And reflections involve a certain kind of fondness. Reflections involve nostalgia. And there are others who reflect with deep bitterness. And I think what's evident in the morning today was there was fondness. And everyone who came back from the morning session told me that it was about being together, being fond, and being optimistic. They're optimistic not for themselves, they're optimistic not for the institute, they're optimistic for you. Because the future is you, and that future is very bright. Thank you very much. What I'm going to do now is to invite the leaders, the deans, people who've created through their imagination, through their work, with the faculty what it is. 4 people are not with us today. One has become one with the immortals, and he can't be with us. But 3 others are either indisposed or unable to travel. Professor B.V. Doshi requires no introduction. He sends his very warm greetings to all of us. Professor Alag is rather unwell, and he had written to Bimal and Mona saying that he would love to be here, his health permitting. It's not permitted him to be here, and Professor Alag is not with us. And so is Professor Ganguly, and is unable to travel from Calcutta. He's conveyed his very warm greetings to Mona and to the entire community. We will take note of their contributions as we go along, but I do wish to place that these are people who are not available with us. Dinesh Mehta and Meera Mehta are not with us today, but we have a recorded video message from them, which we will play at an appropriate time. So I will now request Christopher to start the process of reflecting. We have given ourselves a time limit that each one of us will try and be within that limit of 10 minutes, and so that we have time to be interactive and take reflections from the audience. Thank you.
I'm really thankful that I've been given 1 hour to speak, but I'll speak for just 10 minutes if it's okay. You see, in the beginning there was nothing. When I came to School of Architecture in 1968, there were no planners. Doshi asked me to teach a planning course to the students in the School of Architecture. I also taught a studio. And then we came up with just an idea. Why don't we have a School of Planning? So we wrote a 2-page note, sent it off to the government of Gujarat, government of India, to the Ford Foundation and some other funders. And then I left to accept a teaching job at Harvard University, where eventually I became a tenured assistant professor. About 2 years later, 1971, springtime, Doshi came through Cambridge, stayed with Kartikeya Sarabhai, who was my fellow student at MIT, different topics, and he said, why don't you come back and start the School of Planning? Because we're getting some funding, but there are no planners in Gujarat. Just H.K. Merwada was the chief town planner, nominated as an IS officer to be the Secretary Urban Development. Apte was the chief planner of Gandhinagar. Dr. Deshpande was a transport planner doing all of the new roads in Gujarat. And there were 2 or 3 other people, none of them ready to come and start the school. We had an idea that an urban designer could start it. Everybody said not acceptable. We can't start the school. A few more days later, Preston Andrade from the Ford Foundation, who I knew from Delhi, came through. It's a little story, but he said, why don't you come and start the school? So in 1971, June, I took a cheap charter flight to London with a return from Paris, and I came overland to India, overland from London to Bombay, and I stopped in Ahmedabad and taught a studio with Doshi for 8 weeks now. And we decided, okay, I will quit my job and come and start the school. So I reached here in October 1971. To me, that's when the school started. And what did we have? No teachers, no curriculum, no idea of what to do. I had no one to talk to because there was nobody who had studied planning in the School of Architecture. And I could talk to Merwada and Apte, who became lifelong friends, who were great supporters. And of course, Doshi, we wouldn't all be here unless Doshi was there, great inspirer. And I often feel it was a benefit we had that was he had not studied planning. If he had studied planning, he would have put us in the straitjacket of SPA Delhi and the mafia in Delhi. Let me tell you something about that. When I came to Ahmedabad, only architects, geographers, and civil engineers were allowed to study planning. My first batch of students had social scientists. We had statisticians, sociologists, economists, no? And all kinds of people. Dinesh Mehta was from IIT Madras, but he was a mechanical engineer. Would not have been accepted in SPA, probably one of the greatest planners of our time. And he and I have been involved with SEP for the last, 50-odd years now. So Dinesh would not have been acceptable. And then we had the usual batch of some JJ students and some SEP students now, in a small class, maybe 10 students now. So I want to make it clear, we started illegally. We took students who were not allowed to be students now. And we started teaching. At that time, they taught planning meant taking a map and putting colors and saying this zone is for residential, industrial, public, park is green, draw some roads. It's a 30-meter wide road, an 18-meter wide road, a 9-meter, 12-meter, et cetera. And then putting circles that you need a bridge here, this, there, and that there. And then looking at densities and saying, according to the standards, this many people need a school, a primary school, et cetera, et cetera. So it was by the numbers. It was easy. We said no. I said at MIT, we had people doing computer analysis. We had Jay Forrester doing urban dynamics. This was the first school of planning in the world to teach computer science to planning students. How did we do that? We had no faculty here. We went to IIM. Jeshwant Krishna had just come back from Harvard and MIT. He was my friend there. Vikram had bought him Sarabang, a Hewlett-Packard. We said, can our students use them? Can we teach computer analysis, network theory, data analysis to students using computers? We started that course in the first semester. The main themes of our school were poverty, inequality, and environment. I don't think any other school of planning even knew the word environment at that time. And we had seminars every semester 2 seminars a week on these topics. We invited everyone from Godavari Parulakar, who was Marxist president of the Kisan Sabha, who wrote an important book called When Man Awakes. We had Danagri, who taught peasant movements, no? So we had seminar topics which you might find in leading European and American universities, probably 2 or 3, but not in India at all. Again, they were not in the structured curriculum. Instead of studios where people sit down and take maps and color them, we said, no, we're going to do participatory research. Go into the field, go into the city and document something like the students are doing here. What are the typical dwelling types, shelter types? Chawls, Jhopatpatis, housing societies, and we studied all of these typologies and then tried to map the city, how many are there. Now, in Delhi, you weren't allowed to draw a Jhopatpati on a map because legally they didn't exist. Jhopatpatis were illegal, so you can't draw them on the map. You can't plan for them. The urban villages and cities where all the fabrication and workers who do woodwork, etc., those were also had lines around them, just said urban village, no planning. No? So this school was new in that we taught social structure, social change. We taught urban economics and regional economics. We did the first district plan in India. That was of Panchmahal. No? We did that with Sardar Patel Institute and with the Gujarat Institute of Area Planning. So we did many, many new things which we should be doing today. Computer modeling. We did work with government agencies. We did the district plan with the government of Gujarat. We had people from 5 or 6 different institutes teaching here. We can still do that. We can do it with the Gujarat, the Ahmedabad University next door. So my point is that when we started with nothing, and we came up with new ideas, and they were all challenged by Delhi. There were some very good people in Delhi who came to our rescue and said, no, we need at least one school like this in India. So we started something very new and very different from scratch. I call it Swayambhu, something which starts from nothing, from an urge or just an idea, and it grows into something very large, no? So this school started more or less against the rules, with new ideas, new people, and I'm very happy that some of my students, like Dinesh and Mira, are still involved from the first batch in work. Anita Gokhale Beninger, she's spearheaded biodiversity in the state of Maharashtra, getting an act passed that ecological zones would be kept as biodiversity parks. I'm also happy that Bindu Parikh is sitting here, a friend of mine since, I think, 1970. She did her PhD from Boston University. We've been friends since then. And Navin Garecha, when I opened my first office, he worked with me in 1972. And someplace hiding here is Rajesh Sagar, whose father was Paraji. We all know Paraji Sagar. And Paraji had so many children that he gifted Rajesh to me. Rajesh, are you here? He's hiding someplace. He's here. Hi, Rajesh. No? So there are many people here who I've known since the 60s, like Rajesh since 68, 69. I knew Bimal when he was a kid, when they moved into their new house. His father and I used to sit in. Very naughty people. We drank scotch and soda in the garden while he worked as a kid, I don't know, 8 years old or 9 years old, with a carpenter, learning how to do carpentry. So all of these memories come back to me. They're very fond. But to me, they're very lively and new, because I think CEP today in the School of Planning, the Faculty of Planning, is still the leader. I think we have the best school of planning in Asia, not just in India. We're leaders, but we have to take that with a seriousness. It's a very serious challenge to be a leader, because it means we have to do things for the country of India, for the people of India. The challenge is, how do we employ masses of people? How do we integrate them into the city? I'll just end with one statistic. Recently, about 5 or 6 years ago, a friend of mine in Bombay who worked with me did a survey, and he found that if you take the airport and go south, the EMIs, equated monthly installments for billing, only 3% of the 22 million people in the metropolitan area could afford the EMIs south of the airport. South of Thane, Vashi, that next ring, only another 6% could afford any EMI. And then if you go all the way out to the edges to Karjat, to the edge of the metropolitan area, maybe another 15% could afford something. So what did it mean? It meant about 75% of the people of Bombay cannot afford any kind of legal housing. That means, to me, they're not citizens. They don't have a right to the city. There is no place for 75% of the people in the Bombay metropolitan area to be a legal citizen. They're in makeshift housing, workers' quarters, over redone villages, chopatpatis, and that's the kind of urban environment we've actually created. Not the skyscrapers, not the beautiful boulevards, not the airports. That's the challenge. Your challenge is those 75% of the people who more and more are going to move to cities because the jobs in rural areas have saturated now. There's a very good study by Anand at Azim Primsi University that I'm associated with that says there are no new jobs in rural areas. The job market in the countryside has been saturated. So with that note, I leave this challenge to you, and I have great expectations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christopher. Before I invite Professor Prem Pagutra to speak, we wanted to take a note of Professor Alag and his contribution. Along with Professor Doshi and Christopher, he was very much part of the founding team which thought through some of these issues. Many of you may not be aware, but he was one of, he remains one of India's foremost agricultural economists. And that is one area of economics which has been fundamental to way we've thought about coming out of poverty, coming out of chronic hunger and malnutrition, issues of redistribution. These are the questions that he's grappled with. At some point in his life, he decided to become a public figure. He was invited to the Rajya Sabha. He had a full term in the Rajya Sabha, and during that period between 96 and 98, he was also a minister in the Union Cabinet, Minister of State, with what is called independent charge of planning and program implementation. After his term in Rajya Sabha got over, he continued to remain active researcher, continues to write even today, much less these days, but you would still find opinion pieces from him. He continues to be associated with various institutions, and we do wish him well. Professor Prem Pagutra, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am very proud of being associated with School of Planning. Let me say that upfront. Let me also tell you how I discovered this field, because I wasn't neither at undergraduate level or graduate level. I did not study urban planning, but it was at IIM Calcutta, where I was a PGP student, that Professor Satyesh Chakrabarti, and I'm mentioning that to pay tribute to this great guy who taught a course on urbanization. And I was simply fascinated by the idea that you could study urbanization, that you could actually plan cities. Both these terms, urbanization as well as planning, were absolutely new to me. He also happened to have loaned me the City and History book of Mumford, and I was just carried away. And then I went and therefore got my PhD in urban and regional planning. So I was completely sold. When I came to SAPT in 1991 from the US, this was an institution or a program, the School of Planning program, that I discovered was truly multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary program. Now, these are terms and these are aspirations of universities across the world today. A lot of universities are trying to understand the problem of the silo type of structures of their disciplines, and both the fear and lack of confidence that people have in stepping out of those fields. Whereas in SEPT, this sort of comes naturally. I think it comes within a week of when you enter SEPT. You just observe your fellow students, you see the curriculum, you see the culture in this place, you see the pedagogy. It's all about multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary learning. And that was fantastic. This also converted me into what I would call a fanatic believer in urban planning, in the sense that I would like, I do realize that planning is good for every human being. It doesn't have to be a student. Everyone, everywhere needs planning. So I knew that I was in the right place, or at least studying the right subject. But then I put it into practice by saying that there is this institution about a kilometer away from us called the great IIMA. How come they don't teach urban planning? So I decided I should do that job. I walked over. That was 1994, and that I took up a faculty position in IIM Ahmedabad and wasted no time in introducing courses related to urban planning and environment planning. And Bimal has co-taught a course with me there, and it was one of the very popular elective courses in the institute. So I'm a believer in planning, but in the School of Planning is absolutely unique also because of the culture that has somehow developed here. Even in the morning session today, you could see, by the way, our faculty breed, has a lot of rivalries. One of the things that faculty anywhere are known for is interpersonal rivalries, and I'm sure they're there in the School of Planning also. But I must say that despite all that the respect for each other as well as the openness, almost everybody who spoke in our faculty interaction today was being completely honest and completely open. You can't detect that any comment, not a single comment, had some ulterior motive, either to look good or to do good or to be recognized, nothing of that. It was truly introspection and just with a lot of humility that people did what they did. But my colleagues who were there for those 3 or 4 years that I was teaching here, I have a lot of respect for them. And they were also people who innovated. I mean, the kind of things that they were saying in class, the rest of the world is talking about now. Bajor Mehta used to talk about redevelopment, and redevelopment is probably the biggest sort of challenge, not only for cities, but countries, regions, all across the world. Professor Anjana Vyas was teaching remote sensing. Her commitment was fantastic. On-site education is the in thing in many universities in the world. And that rural planning lab that you heard about and how it was conducted by Professor Ray and others was really, at that time, nobody knew that this on-site kind of education can play such an important role in the development of the mind of a planner. So all these things are, I'm very, very proud of being associated with School of Planning. In our days, of course, we were coming from a tradition of planning education in which the land use planning, environment, housing, environmental planning, and to some extent infrastructure. These were topics that had just come up, so most of the focus in those days was on these topics. And that's why we have the 3 specializations that we do. But very soon, financing of infrastructure, managing services, sustainable development, governance issues were the things that the prior decades, the planning had a kind of blind side to these things. So these are the topics, and our faculty as well as students wasted no time in getting on top of some of these issues and challenges. So now, of course, there's also the issues of sustainability, partnerships, quality of life in cities, equity and justice. And once again, for example, Professor Darshini, having set up that Center for Equity for so many years and done some fantastic research output, is an example of that. And on sustainability, I can't not mention one of our students we are very proud of, Manvita there, who, she only told me that she was scared of my statistics class, that she would panic. But on the other hand, I must tell her that her original thesis, which was on the recycling of discarded building materials by the poor, I can't tell you that you can think of a topic that has greater relevance to sustainability or that captures sustainability than what she did at that time. And of course, her work since then speaks volumes for how she has worked on many, many dimensions of sustainability. Okay. So, but we must also look into the future. I'll only drop some buzzwords here to give you ideas. And by the way, the exhibition outside that I saw, which covered many of these topics, was very, very impressive. And that's how our studios have always been. And really, I'm very proud of that. But the new sort of ideas for the future that we are likely to work with, and I'm sure you're also thinking about that. The term that's coined these days is quite popular, is the future of work. And what people are trying to say is, just like there were some massive shifts in the context of professional work being life and employment and so on, at the time of the Industrial Revolution or even prior to Industrial Revolution, and then when the computers came into society. So now you have a similar kind of big sort of shift going to happen with the artificial intelligence, with big data analysis, and those kind of things. So the future of work changes are going to have great implications for our cities. So it would be a good idea if some of the students at least start looking at what those future scenarios of cities might be if many of these massive shifts do take place. Sustainability in its larger sense, which we have worked for many years to include social equity and justice, is something that, and reducing inequalities, is something that these problems are never going away. So you can't sweep them under the carpet. You'll have to deal with them with your planning tools. You'll have to influence policymakers, decision makers, and keep on doing it, keep at it till things happen. Okay? Energy, water, waste, climate change, and finally, ecological balance. I think these are the type of things, or these are the frameworks that they have dealt with these topics indirectly many times. But I feel that these are the frameworks in which people may need to recast their research thesis, lab works, to capture things which are addressing the real serious problems that humanity is facing and which have very direct implications for their human settlements and habitat. And of course, one of the ideas that seems to have slipped away from us, it was always with us, but is the community cohesion. And some of it happens because now you live in these 25-storied apartment building blocks, and you get urbanization itself has a built-in tendency towards alienation and so on. So planners need to obviously work at that, but also to recreate and rediscover the idea of community living and community cohesion. So that's where it stands. To all the students who are here, let me tell you that, of whether I have taught well or not, my classes were good or interesting or not, it actually doesn't matter a whole lot. But what matters is what you guys go and do in the world outside. That rubs off on me. So we have a lot of stake in you, and we feel very proud of you. Always look forward to your success. And I think you already, I see, and I've always seen that the SEP students have made a difference in all kinds of organizations. You know, it could be private sector, it could be the consulting sector, it could be government jobs. So keep at it, keep doing well, but also maybe it is time for some of you to become social entrepreneurs, to take your ideas and get on to this startup wagon also, because there are opportunities there, and these are the opportunities that you should grab. So I'm all for you, and it's a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Rabin Ganguly joined the institute in 1973 as a faculty, so he was part of that early cohort with Christopher, Professor Doshi, Professor Vishwanathan, who conceptualized the program and carried it forward. In early 80s, I think, he became both the director of the school as also the chair of its academic committee. And the two major contributions that he made was to start the program in housing as also the program in environmental planning. He's unable to be, he's not with us today because he's in Calcutta and unable to travel. Barjor?
Good afternoon. So as the theme is reflections, let me start from the time that I joined the School of Planning. Because if I go further back, I would have to start in 1974 when I joined the School of Architecture, and I don't have the time to talk about all of that. But so 1990 was a wonderful time and a very scary time at the same time. It was a time when India was going bankrupt, and it was a time of churn, and no one knew exactly where we would land up. You know, we are a culture which depends on, or which loves our gold, and there were photographs in newspapers where Indian gold was being put on flights to London to mortgage to get money. What is going on in Sri Lanka, we were not that bad as what is going on in Sri Lanka today, but we were close to that. And it was at that time that I joined the School of Planning. And here we were talking about reform, and we had begun to mention markets, and the contradiction was that we depended 100% on the government for grants, but we were talking about markets. So at some point when the government went bankrupt, they just said, you're talking about markets, go find your money. And we had no answer. None of us had any answer. I have been telling people this, that I remember this. I don't know how many of you would remember Rawal. Some of you would know Rawal, Mr. Rawal. The great Mr. Rawal. He was our accountant, soul, our conscience, everything, because he was rough and ready. And the day I took over from Prem, he came with his big red ledger with the red, horrible tape at the end. And he says, he opened the book and says, look, this is all yours. And I looked at the bottom, and we had 3,000, roughly, a little less than 3,000 rupees in the State Bank of India account. 3,000 rupees. For a School of Planning which had, 60 odd students, we had 10 or so odd faculty members, we had gardeners, we had, and none of this existed. And we had the buildings which were almost falling apart. You couldn't go for a break to the 2 rooms that were there. Those were horrible places. And so it was from there that we tried to change, but at no point, and as many of my other colleagues have mentioned earlier, at no point did we let that, the lack of resources or the lack of support, at no point did we let that affect the students. And I used to have a saying that we learned how to serve stone soup. Do you know what the concept of stone soup is? is that when you're very poor and you have no money, you can put stones in water and turn it around and say, wow, this is great soup, and then you serve it to your children and say, drink this water, it's great soup. So we were serving stone soup to people, but we never let that affect. We may not have been perfect teachers because we were also struggling, but we never let that affect the students. And I think that is a great lesson that I learned, which actually taught me many big lessons in my later life, in my later professional life, is that adversity is to be expected. Adversity is to be embraced, because it is through that that your opportunities arise. So at that time, we had no other option but to start to do, I don't know what better word for it is, consulting. So I remember sitting on, I had a kinetic Honda, a black kinetic Honda. I loved that little vehicle. Shivanand and I would go in 42 degrees centigrade to Gandhinagar because we wanted the government of Gujarat to give us some consulting. For 2 years we tried, we got nothing. Nothing. No one gave us a contract. We had no history of doing consulting. We had no history of advising on public policy. So that's the second thing, is perseverance. Perseverance, perseverance, perseverance. I learned that because I was very young in my life. I was lucky enough to join a high-altitude mountaineering program run by my high school. So I had climbed a peak of 18,000 feet before I came to the School of Architecture. And the only way you can do high-altitude mountaineering is persistence, because the slope never ends. It never ends. You go step by step by step, and the damn thing never ends. The peak never appears. And you think, I'm going to die before that peak appears. And just as when you're about to give up, the peak appears and you are on the top. And so that's the perseverance that I think SEP teaches. So when you are being pushed in your studios and your labs to what you think is the end of your abilities, that is when you have to push harder. And I always believe that when students complain, is you have to give them more work. Yes, don't give in to the faculty. Do not give in when students complain. Because when they complain, you are able to understand that they are reaching a point, but you have to have the capacity to understand what is the breaking point. And it should not be unreasonable. But push, and as a student, you have to push yourself harder. The other thing that I learned here in CEPT was that we talk about ourselves as being informal, but what is that? What is formality and what is informality? So the way I have, over the years, I developed a visceral hatred for bureaucracy. But I work in one of the world's largest bureaucracies right now. But I hate, so how do you deal with that? Because you will, as planners and as urban designers and as housing specialists, you will face bureaucracy. And what is the way to do bureaucracy is to have your information and you have to have data. You know the famous saying, right? That in God we trust, but everybody else bring data. So if you don't have data, if you do not have your facts, if you do not have your arguments, you will never convince everybody. So today, Christopher was asking while the presentation was going on, that can you give me in 1 minute, what is your... So can we convince people? Can we convince people of our convictions? So can we become good storytellers? And the reason why I love teaching is because I love to tell stories. And how do you tell stories which are interesting but have a meaning, so that there is a sense of learning while joking about something, laughing about something, but deeply at the heart of it all is what are the values you have and why are you doing what you're doing? To be able to ask the last question first is, why am I doing this? I'm not looking at my phone, I'm looking at the time. That's a storytelling story, right? Now, so essentially, and then the formality side of it. So I work for a bureaucracy, a multilateral bureaucracy, where In fact, just yesterday we received an email, all of us, 15,000 of us all over the world, we got this email that now we are reaching September, and from 1st of September we will be having business formal dress. That means everybody, all the men will be wearing ties. I've worked for that organization now for close to 20 years. I do not own a tie. And one of my ex-bosses had once asked me early on, he's saying while we were walking, he said, Barjot, I have noticed you never wear a tie. And I didn't know what to answer, so I told him, yes, because I'm a Septian. And he had no idea what I was talking about. He's from Scotland. But he was so taken aback that he went and asked his secretary, what is a Septian? So she Googled Septian and she got no answer. So she came and she said, Barjot, I have to answer, I have to tell him what a Septian is. What is it? So I thought, why are you asking? He said, you told him that you are a Septian. So I said, well, it's not a religion, but it's an attitude. It's an attitude. And it's that attitude that you must have. And that attitude, you cannot get that attitude if you are not fully informed, if you are not comfortable in your skin, and if you are not able to express yourself. So these are things that go beyond the field of planning, and they go beyond the field of, this is education. That's why you are here. Your parents pay the fees, or I hope some of you are paying your own fees. But if they are paying fees, they must get something out of it. And it's what they get out of it are the values that you will receive here. The information, the knowledge, yes, that's okay. That you can get anywhere. But it's the culture that you absorb and what you go out of this campus on. That's the most important thing. Thank you. I think I am exactly 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Barjot. Professor B.N. Vishwanath took over as the director of the School of Planning in 1984, taught both legislation and planning laws, but one of his great contributions was to the state of Gujarat and to the country, because he was invited to be the vice chairman of the Sardar Sarovar Nigam Limited, that he served with distinction for a very long time. He passed away in early 90s, so we remember his contribution. Could we have the film or the recorded speech of Dinesh Mehta, please? Thank you.
Hello everyone. We apologize sincerely for not being able to be present today for this occasion, much as we would have liked, but our program of travel was such that we just could not change. So sincere apologies to all. 50 years of School of Planning or Faculty of Planning is an important occasion. We have been a part of planning faculty in some sense since its inception, initially as a student and then for many years as a faculty member or as a director, as we called themselves in the early days. I still remember those days back in '72 when Christopher, Professor Doshi, Professor Alag introduced us to what planning was. And I think we still remember that, the kind of journey that we embarked on from those days. We are still continuing that journey. The way I think nobody sort of understood what exactly planning was or how different we were from the other planning schools. But I think the curriculum, the way it was designed to become multidisciplinary, even the students' intake was multidisciplinary. And I think it sort of imbibed the spirit in us of doing something new, doing something great. And I think that spirit still continues even today in our work. We continue to learn, continue to do new things. And I think that has been something that SEPT, the School of Planning, has provided us. We still remember those days when there was a small group of students. We were shocked coming from formal or institution to call our faculty members by their first names. And so whether it was Christopher or Doshi, and that was a big shock, but that also brought us much closer to the faculty members. And I think that tradition we continued when we became faculty members, and interacting with students off and on campus, partly because the student body was very small. But it was very selective. I remember we used to get 300 to 400 applications for those 15 positions in the planning school. And when we added other programs in housing and environmental planning, the number of students increased to about 40, but we still had to select out of 400, 500 students. And I think that enabled us to get the brightest and the best students from the country, and it actually made teaching very interesting, fun. And now that we meet all our graduates who are doing variety of work in the field, some of them may be in this audience or listening to us, and we know the diverse occupations that they have followed, both in the traditional town planning department, but also in private consulting firms, non-governmental organizations, or even international agencies like World Bank, Asian Development Bank. So I think the education and the traditions at planning school have prepared students for doing a variety of jobs, and we are glad to meet all our former students who are into variety of positions, variety of places, and that is something that's the great Guru Dakshina that one can have. Just as we tell Christopher and Doshi when we meet them that they have been our gurus, and many of our students tell us the same. So I think that's very heartening to note. So all the best wishes for the event. Once again, sorry to have been missing this occasion, but promise that in any other event we will try and be there. Thank you. Hello.
Thank you, guys. Professor Shivanand Swami.
Namaskara. I came to SEPT in 1981 from a small village in Karnataka, and I was selected based on two criteria. One is I am from a rural area who understood the rural workings very well, and number two, because I had a master's degree in economics, I had a good hold on the subject. I could apply it to my rural dynamics very well, and those two things which got me into the School of Planning. But there are also other things which I had an option to be a lecturer in a local college, which would have fetched me 1200 rupees, and I was getting 600 rupees as a stipend. I said, invest in these 2 years in this school, and I'm sure with the 600 I will survive, and subsequently I will be able to make my life better. I think I have made my life and my choice better, and that's what proves after all these years of 41 years with SEPT University. I also would like to say, at that point, architecture used to get about 3,500 to 4,000 applicants for just about 30 seats. The people who came here were really of the elite of the lot, both academically and probably even financially. Whereas planning was of a different kind. People came from different economic backgrounds there. And that distinction at that time was very stark. Over the years, things have changed. We see people both in architecture, in all our programs, from all different socio-economic background. And one important thing what one could notice at that time, a gentleman from TCPO, Chief Town Planner, had come to our class. He was taking a class. He was annoyed that all of us were wearing slippers with those blue stripes in the class. And that used to be almost like a uniform at that time. Okay? But now, definitely, things have evolved and we are much better in our buildings were different. But what we have, I think, is an enormous change. Thanks to Vimal, in the past 5-6 years, things have even gone to a significant level. Second thing I'd like to talk about is the kind of inputs which we received while we were doing planning. Okay. Our first studio was headed by Professor Doshi, Dinesh Mehta and Meera Mehta. And our area of work was, the location was Kalupur railway station. After the end of the 4 months, we came back and we had a blank sheet as a proposal. They asked us, what is this nonsense? We said, the problems to Kalupur is not in Kalupur, but they are outside Kalupur, and therefore you need to look at the entire city. You cannot solve Kalupur problems studying Kalupur. And that was much appreciated. I think we could take that liberty as a student to argue with the faculty that, look, what you believe in, you continue and you do it and show it there. I think that's the second thing I thought I would like to bring it to your notice. Third, we used to have a very good grounding in economics. We had one economics micro, macro, and economics 2 as public finance. I think that aspect, it seems to have watered down over a period of time. Maybe it's time that we bring back some rigor in terms of economics. So also the quantitative methods. We had quantitative methods 1, quantitative methods 2. I think those are two things, including management. We may have to bring it back in or strengthen that input into our planning program. I think that's what I would like to bring it here. We had people from Sardar Patel Institute, we had people from Gandhi Labour, we had people from GIDR coming and actually teaching as part of the planning program in a significant way. That also helped us understand things in a much better way. Number 4 rather. When I became the director, that was by chance. Okay, that's because my predecessor Berger decided to go to US. Okay, and I didn't know I am going to become director of the School of Planning at that point in time, and I became whatever they decided to make me the director of School of Planning. We had all the problems Berger had talked about. Money, we had to go beg, borrow, not steal, yeah, in Delhi, and then. But we could manage all of that with the support of the people in the governments at various levels. And that we could mobilize that support because, not because I knew anybody or I come from a very well-known family, but because of our work which this institute was doing, the reputation which this institute had and continues to have. We could go and talk to people. We are from Ahmedabad, we are from SEPT. I think people would take a different kind of an attitude towards us. I think that is what made us succeed in bringing all that back to that part of it there. We also became an university at that time, had an opportunity to pursue that task as well as an associate director of the SEPT at that time. Okay? And then that also became easy because we are affiliated with North Gujarat, and then became an university through the State Act. Krishnaben was there. Of course, Anandiben was there. And Chief Minister, then Chief Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi. I think thanks to all of them and Mr. Panirvel, who was the Secretary of Education, we became an university as an independent university. We also got UGC approval under Section 2A without UGC visiting the university. It's a rare kind of a situation. All of that happened, again, because what SEPT was and what SEPT is and what SEPT, I'm sure, will always be in the future. That's one there. Number 4, when I'm talking about work with governments, Berger called it as consultancy. I'm not going to call it as consultancy. Why do we consultancy? Consultancy is there is a TOR, terms of reference, you adhere to the terms of, you respond to the terms of reference. Whereas we as Septians, I don't think we just limit ourselves to the TOR. We go beyond the TOR. We try and address the issue in hand. I think that attitude that we would like to solve the problems, that makes a lot of difference in the outputs and also what you get as a response from the client. I think that's what made us what we are today, and therefore our work, both in terms of the BRT in Ahmedabad, or even for that matter, Surat, many of these cities, whatever has been done, continues to be appreciated. Happy to be part of this whole work there. And two last things. One, the opportunity this university gives you, as this institution gives you, is an example. When I joined as a lecturer in 1986, I was told you have to establish a computer lab. I wrote to a proposal to AICT. They sanctioned some 5 lakhs. And all the 5 lakhs, then the director was Dinesh Mehta. I could spend all the 5 lakhs, okay, whatever was required to be spent on different purchases there. Nobody actually oversees that purchase. They could trust me as a young man, as a lecturer. You could do all of that purchase. Subsequently, we bought GIS, and Anjana got remote sensing. Again, we wrote to ISRI, the director, that gentleman was Danger Mond, is that right, Anjana? And then he gave us GIS software free to be used as part of academic program. All of that was possible, again, because what we are and what we do. I think that's the point which I would like to highlight once again. And finally, in future, I think we have different programs, and over a period of time, we have expanded, but so also planning field is expanding. We have faculty of planning, we have faculty of management, faculty of technology, faculty of architecture, and then the design. Now, is there a way, like multidisciplinary part of it, what all of us have been talking about? In fact, my group discussion topic for my admission was also multidisciplinary planning. Okay? Is there a way that we could all together as 5 faculty establish programs as multidisciplinary in that nature? Can we have technology and planning, technology and management, planning and management programs as multiple specializations? I think that's where we believe we need to look towards to. That's where the future is. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. May I request Professor Utpal Sharma, please?
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, well, in fact, Shivanand was my classmate, so we studied together in planning. But my journey is slightly different. But the problems that Prem Pangotra, Berger, and Shivanand, what they face, I also faced the same thing, but I became more mature because we knew that we have to run around AICT, get the money, etc., etc. So after I joined in 81, graduated in 83, and then I joined with Professor Doshi in Brussels, and I have been fortunate to really work on some of the pioneering urban planning, housing, urban design projects with some of the very renowned people from CEP, like Professor Mittu, Dr. Vishwanath, Ravin Kangali, Dinesh, Meera, etc., including who are not a faculty but Joseph Allenstein. And it was a kind of a really good grounding to what to do in a professional field. But I always wanted to come back to CEPT as a faculty because it was a kind of an attraction in Ahmedabad. So you spend most of your time here at the campus beyond the office hours. I started working as a visiting faculty, and eventually, yes, at the end of 91, beginning of 92, I joined here as a faculty on kind of an ad hoc basis. Shivanand was a but Berger was the director at that point in time. And problems we knew because we had three actually relatively young people, Berger, Shivanand and me, and that time when Dinesh and Mira left, there was a big debate, no? How will it run with three young guys and some other people, what will happen to SEP? But we answered the question to Doshi and Alagh that we will manage it, it's not a big problem. We didn't know the challenges, okay, but we were energetic and we worked, and I think over a period of 10 years, it all turned out to be, it was a problem, but we could overcome. And I have been fortunate enough that I was director maybe for 10 years, but before that I was there. And we started many new programs in the School of Planning, and we also hired many of the faculty members who are presently there, but they have been selected by us, and they were also our students, many of them. And we have a kind of a very cohesive group, and that cohesion that exists, and a lot of challenges, whatever that was there, it was very easy to take care of it because it was faculty were so energetic that we don't have to allocate any work to them. They come forward and took any work on their own, academic affairs, admissions, traveling all over India, placement, etc. It was all happening very well. And at that point in time, there's nothing like what do you really do in future, because every month we had to figure it out. So yes, we got the money from AICT and survival was difficult, but we were managing. Our fees and everything was less because they were funded by the government. And that's the time we also had the earthquake in Gujarat. We did some voluntary work along with School of Architecture. School of Planning also got into it. And that really got us what Berger was saying, that we are not getting work. We tried for consultancy, but that brought us some kind of a breakthrough. And we started getting small works. And I've even used like biodata of Professor Doshi, Dr. Vakil, etc., because we had to build our credential. We didn't have. But after one or two such projects, we built up enough. And what I felt, because that's what I have been working with Professor Doshi for many years, that how can we really bring, link teaching and practice? It is like, is it teach only from the book, or can we really bring the live projects from the ground to the classroom? Because all the things that we study about garden cities of tomorrow, small town is beautiful, these are all still, we still teach, but really teach something else. So we have to start working on a live situation. And various work that we got into SEP, and we also gave the similar problem to the students, and so they were happy to work on live projects. Not that they prepared the plan, it was done by us, but it kind of changed the outlook that you're working on something and what you are doing is relevant. Somebody is interested in what you are doing. And it grew up, and we had a huge success. And in terms of work, all kinds of regional plan, master plan, vision, infrastructure, all kinds of things that were there. And faculty and the students. But it also brought in some amount of resources to the institute, because we did some repair of some building. We didn't have enough money to make a new building, but some amount of upgradation of infrastructure, etc., was done. And I thought that atmosphere became little positive. We are not really trying to survive from day-to-day situation. So with the new programs, with some amount of success, and with a philosophy that we work on live project or learning by doing, because we already had a lab kind of a situation where we can integrate everything. So it happened when I remember in the World Urban Forum, now Dr. Ray was there with me. There are 300 universities and telling how magnificent they are. And Dr. Ray put up his hand and we had to say something. So he said, we have only 30,000 books in our library and many of them are second, etc. But we work on live project on ground. We are there on site. And that nobody has. And that was the kind of hugely appreciated. And we carried on from there. So with this progress, so 10 years, a lot of new faculty, program, final situation, it has all improved. Now, I have students from all over the place, all over the world. Many times I don't know their name, but I know the thesis topic. If they say, then I can place it. So it was going great, and we also tried to establish undergraduate planning. It was a kind of a difficult thing to take it up, but we thought maybe there's now time to establish a planning as a profession rather than a specialization. So we have a B plan, M plan, and a doctoral program. So we made an attempt on it, and we started, but later on maybe we discontinued for various reasons. So I don't want to get into it, but idea is that SEP being the leading school of planning in India, or it is our responsibility to really establish the profession. And we have always had got good application, number of students, etc. We remember in those days we didn't have internet, so we used to travel all over India to select our students, and that was a kind of an informal alumni meet. Automatically students come, and we had 8 or 10 places every year, and plus the kind of work that we are doing and from various places. So it brought in huge amount of recognition as well as number of applications, etc., etc. And that's what it is, because we are a small university. Okay, Shivanand already told about how we become an university. A university less than 2,000 students. And even the primary school, my daughter was studying, Woodgum School is bigger. Okay, but we are an university. So how do you really make yourself valuable? I think that is the challenge. We are small, but we are doing it a very important area of urban planning that we have to play that role, and we have to move forward in that direction, and we have to look in the future with the new education policy, etc., etc. We cannot now say that we are the best in the world, but we have to actually go out and prove ourselves. Okay, and we have to move towards it, and that's it. There are many other things, but I don't want to get into it. But we said, I wish the School of Planning to be the best school of planning, not only in India, but other parts of the world as well. We are known all over, but we know our weakness and we should overcome on our own. And I wish everybody all the best and School of Planning a glorious next 50 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Professor Darshini Mahadevia, please.
First of all, let me say that it's great to be here. The place has terribly changed in last many years. It's also good to see ex-colleagues and some of the students who are here. Some faces I recognize. The current students, I don't know, but it's really good to see some of the past students here. I mean, if I think about and ruminate about this place, then it goes back to, as Badir was saying, way back in history. If anybody had attended Rahul Mehrotra's talk a few days back, he had told me that he was going to show a picture where Minister Fuller was here. And some of us figured in that photograph, it is, I think, 3 of us from our batch, Ismat, myself, and Kiran Kapadia were sitting on the ramp, which is that iconic ramp of Sept University, where as students we have spent so much of time. So there are lots of memories associated with this place. And as I think the students who are current students would see the galaxy of the ex-deans sitting here and how well they've done, who have graduated also either architecture or planning from this Sept University. The university has got named because of what students have done in their careers. And Sept is known for the practice that students have done as professionals. And I hope all of you are going to continue with that practice of being at the forefront of the profession and discipline. I sort of agree with the sentiments about about building the institution, the tasks and travels of being a dean in a situation in a country where things are fluctuating so much, changing very rapidly. Education sector has changed very drastically from publicly funded institution to privately funded institutions, and there have been travels of that, and the CEPT planning school also has gone through that travels, as we hear from our ex-deans today. So I'm not going to speak about some of this nostalgic view of my association here. It's been 25 years. I've been here at CEPT in School of Planning for 25 years. So that's the longest stint in terms of what I've done in my profession or my working life. What I want to speak about today, because I also don't want to repeat what's been said, is something that we started discussing when I was the dean, and that is of essence now, and a lot of people have sort of talked about multidisciplinarity as the hallmark and the pillar of a planning school here. There was this question, that question remains unanswered, is how does planning education be imparted? Do we have silo-ized disciplines, or do we have integration of disciplines? And that discussion started while I was the dean. We changed the structure, it's changed again, because there's no final answer. And I think that's what we need to be ready to, that things are changing very rapidly, and there's no final answer of how things are going to be looked at or delivered. But one must keep in mind that when we speak about a position or take a position, there's always the other side of it. And as planners, if we have to look at everything in what the current context, 360 degree, I've learned some of this new lingo recently, but to look at things in a broader holistic perspective, there are going to be those challenges as we go forward. I think some people have adhered to, but India is at a juncture where we are expected to pick up in terms of urbanization. More people are going to. There are disputes around the numbers that are living in urban areas. Leaving that aside, but the whole global community is watching South Asia and Africa for the future urbanization practices and urbanization issues that are going to come up, which means that the countries that have urbanized in the past were urbanizing and taking decisions in a linear way, unilateral way, whereas now that we are going to look at, and if you look at all the global agendas and issues that are around, there are going to be multiple things that we will have to be addressing. It's not just putting infrastructure in the cities or discussing about how the transport will be, but what is the current juncture, what is greatly important, and as somebody said, the climate change we have seen in last summer across India, and we're still, I think towns in Uttar Pradesh are currently underwater, from Assam to Uttar Pradesh. Some of the towns and cities were in water in Gujarat, and we're going to see extreme erratic behavior of the weather, which is something that's not predictable. A lot of models have not been able to predict that. How are planners going to work in this situation and face the challenge? Because everybody says, if you look at any of the global agenda, it says that urban planning will solve this problem. How does one do that? That's a big issue. There are certain norms that we think and we are practicing now, talking about high densities and things like that of what we need to do in our cities. This is one example, but there could be many other examples. All studies that if you review, high densities are the cause of urban heat island. And it creates canyons which leads to increased experience of thermal discomfort at the local level, along with very, very high proportion of people living in informality. And I think 2 students of the planning school worked with me in the summer as interns, and when we carried out the survey in informal settlements, it was really, really shocking to see every house that visited had fallen ill because of heat. It was carried out in the month of May and June. And these are going to be increasing challenges. The increasing challenge of dengue, because dengue is an outcome of urban form and urban built form. And there are now possible relationships that have been established by research. Unfortunately, we don't have that in India. So there is going to be question on all the norms and understanding that we have of how cities were to be developed are going to be coming under question and challenge, and we need to relook at them of what we are going to do. So lastly, what I want to say is that planning, and I'm really fortunate to be having worked at School of Planning and then Faculty of Planning here for so long, where we had this much broader approach to how we look at cities and try and solve the problems. We must remember, that this discipline came up globally, largely post-Second World War, as a process of reform, as a process of being more inclusive. Again, it came up as a discipline which intervened in the market to bring equity. And so when I hear the talk about market-based planning, I think that's an oxymoron as to whether that's the right, because planning has come to question and challenge and deal with situations that markets have caused imbalances. And planning as a profession in 1950s developed in what is called a political economy situation of social democracy. It talks about welfare-based cities or plan interventions. It talked about inclusiveness, all the term buzzwords that we are using, but that was the basis of what planning was expected to be. I'm not talking about planning by Corbusier and others. They were sort of more anti-urban. They want the kind of cities that were thought of, Broadacre City and others, were actually anti-urban ideas, what we call utopian urban planning. But subsequently, Second World War onwards, and what we imbibed in India is based on a political philosophy, which is social democracy. That social democracy in the current world has gone for a toss, and we've become more in cities as well as more location-specific, market-driven developments, which are leading to more patchwork kind of development in the cities. And we're going to have a quilt of patchwork that we'll see over time. I really have no problem if quilt of patchwork was to be extended to all informal settlements and other areas. And that's where we are, and I think they're going to be, because we're going to urbanize, all of you are going to face these challenges in your practice, and it would be useful for you to look at these issues around to find more meaningful role in the profession that you're going to practice from now. Thank you, it's exactly 10 minutes.
Thank you, ma'am. Could we have the video from Professor Meera Mehta? Thank you.
Hi everyone. Really sorry, as Dinesh also said, to not be able to be there and meet all of you. It's really something that we are both going to really miss. And really sorry that we couldn't change the plans to be there. But I hope that as we move on this FP at...
Her disappearing act continues, so could we, yeah?
Hi everyone. Really sorry, as Dinesh also said, to not be able to be there and meet all of you. It's really something that we are both going to really miss. And really sorry that we couldn't change the plans to be there. But I hope that as we move on this FP at 50 celebrations, and I would say maybe SP at 50 because that's what I am familiar with much more. Hope to meet all of you again and again later. In terms of, they asked me to do some reflections on what I remember when we started, I think, which was exactly 50 years ago, 1972, when we came in as fresh students. I think my image of planning was that as an architect, I would design and build housing for the poor. That was my sort of limited thinking at that time. But I think this 2 years that we spent at Ahmedabad at that time in the School of Planning really changed completely my perspective of what planning could be, what the role of a planner could be, what kind of aspects that we need to be thinking about, looking at. And I think, and a phrase that I really like to use is that I think the 2 years at SP at that in that 50 years ago really taught us how to learn for ourselves. That learning to learn is something that is what has helped me all through my career. The last 50 years, I've also been working over the last 50 years in a wide variety of jobs and occupations. And everywhere, this is something that has always helped me. I think what we learned was so wide ranging, to listening from to Professor Alag talking about economics, to doing really actual interviews at community level with families on what their perspectives were. I think that wide ranging exposure that we got as students is something that later, when we were, both Dinesh and I were as professors, as teachers at School of Planning, also tried to bring into our teaching and our sort of ideas on curriculum. So that's something that I hope that it holds true. Exposure to new ideas, exposure to new people, how to interact. Very importantly, how to be a team player. We learn to work in what we at that time called laboratories, because we were actually learning to find new ways of doing things. Those laboratories were great places where students learned to work with each other. Some students actually took leadership roles, some students did other roles. But this is something that was very, very important, and I think continues to be the main sort of backbone of education in planning here also. Lastly, let me say that I think the most important part was that School of Planning was great fun. We really enjoyed ourselves, not only in classrooms but also outside. We did a wide, as a student body, close friends, we did a large number of fun things, and I think that also brought us very close. And later, as faculty, we continued these traditions. We had students come to our house quite often, more for dinner sometimes just to celebrate some event. And Holi was always a major event that we all played together. And I think this really kept the student and faculty as one rather than. And I think, let me say that I hope the tradition of calling each other by first name is something that somehow, when we were away, it seems to have gone away. And I hope it comes back, because I think that brings a camaraderie that is very, very important in our kind of small institutions. So all the best as you deliberate, as you discuss about what kind of activities we should be taking up to celebrate the 50 years of School of Planning. And I look forward to meet all of you in the next event. Thank you. Hi everyone. Really sorry.
Yep. There's a lot of animation there on a revolving chair. Professor Phatak, please.
I am the last one of the past deans. And you must be wondering why such an old person was the last dean. That was very accidental. I mean, I'm not, in the morning I said I am the accidental dean of Faculty of Planning. And I have no intention of comparing myself with another celebrated person who carries that label as accidental. Why accidental? Briefly, I will tell you that Bimal knew me since 1995, and probably I was on his radar throughout the next 20 years or so. And in the 21st year, he captured me and asked me to be a dean. I made all the nakhras for avoiding that. I said, मैं इतना बुढ़ा हूँ, 70 years, why do you invite me to join here? I don't have a PhD. I don't even have a master's degree which is recognized by ITPI, AICTI, etc. He said, nothing doing. And he said, no, you must join. So finally, I joined as the dean. I joined as the dean, and there were already very accomplished teachers and researchers like Shivanand and Darshani there. So I was quite apprehensive that what would I do in this place as a dean. After so many years, I was dean from 16 to 19, and now it's 2022. Now I realize why Bimal asked me to join the dean. The first reason is perhaps more serious, and the second one is rather frivolous. The first reason is that last couple of days back, UGC coined a phrase called professor of practice. And probably Bimal knew that 6 years back, that there has to be professors of practice, and that is how I was brought in. The second reason, and the quite frivolous one, is that yesterday in a presentation, Bimal was saying that he has evolved from having a black cover to the white cover. And probably he was looking for someone who has skipped that white cover stage. And that is why he invited me to be a dean. One of the main objectives during that 3-year period that I was trying to pursue was to introduce urban economics in a more serious way, and not as theoretical urban economics, but something which is applied urban economics. How far I succeeded in that, I'm not sure. But I think that is, over the years, that is going to be a very important thing, the way in which the Indian macroeconomic policies are emerging. Particularly in the case of spatial planning and land use planning, I think one has to understood that it is an intervention in the land market. And even if you feel that market is your enemy, that is how planners are taught. Even if you think that market is your enemy, the first thing in the war is to understand what that enemy is. If you don't know the enemy, how can you fight him? And that is what is something very important missing from the urban planning legacy in India, because right from 1965 to urban land ceiling legislation of 76, we always believed that we must remove market from the land. And DDA, Chandigarh, Gandhinagar, Navi Mumbai, all these were examples of planning, and which had no market in land, at least at the planning stage. Finally, the market comes in, and it has some serious repercussions in terms of what are the outcomes of that. The second one which I tried to introduce was in fact a response to the job market for planners. The job market for planners was expecting planners to play a role in project formulation as well, and not just planning. And the project formulation implied that you identify the project, identify how feasible it is in terms of economic evaluation, social impact analysis, environmental assessment, and then make that project which is viable in all its aspects. And therefore, I think the third semester studio was introduced as a project studio across all 4 or 5 streams. Whether all those teachers would give me that credit for introduction, I am not sure, but I think that is how it was attempted to be done. So over that period, one can't be either nostalgic, because there is no long history which others have said, But that is what I attempted to do, and perhaps it would continue to be relevant for next couple of years and also evolve in that direction in future. The last point I would make is appreciation of this podium, where you can see me more. You know, in the Audi, when I used to stand before the podium, only my head was seen by the audience. So appreciation for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Monayer.
Thank you. You know, when Darshini Ben said that galaxy of deans, I felt like Pluto or Neptune. And the other day, last night, we were setting up some things here, and I walked outside, and one of the students asked, how does it feel to be a student here and then a dean? And I said, right now, the only thing I can feel is whether the lights will work in the auditorium, whether the food will arrive on time, whether everybody will land on time. And I think that's what I had as a reflection. But just those lighter moments apart, I think as I reflect on the journey of FP that I have lived for about 27 years now, it starts with 1996 when I joined here as a student of planning. And then I went out, worked in the industry after graduation. I tried different things in profession. I started with typical understanding of planning, the physical planning. I worked with Utpal at Doshi's office for a year. I really learned a lot. I felt this was not something that I wanted to do. I moved from there. I went to Mumbai. I worked on planning projects, developing projects, appraising them, financing them. Somehow, whatever I had learned here at School of Planning, which I could not really count or quantify, helped me so much to wade through those professional challenges or the professional requirements. So there was something really very solid that was taught here. In 2005, I thought I want to return to teaching. Teaching was always my first love. For the love of teaching, I joined CEPT 2005, and after that I was teaching here, and a teacher always wants to be a teacher, and academic administration is the last thing that anyone wants to do who wants to teach. In 2020, I was approached by Bimal, and he said, Mona, aa karvanu che. And I don't know why he did that to me. And he had promised that he would do it only for a year, and after a year he called me and said, Haji 3 varas karvanu che. And, but believe me, it has been such a wonderful journey. I had my own moments of frustrations. I had my own moments of challenges. I did not have challenges as big as the deans earlier had. Today, you know, I was reminded of that dialogue, Mera gam kitna kam hai, you know, because all these deans said they struggle to get money, they struggle to get building. I think I did not struggle for those things. Other struggles are really, really very small, and if they are not there, I don't think there is fun anymore. So what was the first thing that occurred to me when I had to take charge as a dean was to believe in the decision that the leadership at university had taken for me. Second was to believe in myself and to believe in the belief that my colleagues and my students had in me, and it was a tough time. I think it went on quite fine. I call myself as a fully homegrown dean who has sort of been a teacher, been a student, and then in the academic administration. And I feel it made me more complete as an academic. I could see the holistic view of students, teachers, administration, inside out and outside in, when I say, and how we view what we teach in context of the changing market needs, and how we institutionalize it, but not fossilize it. And these were all constant learnings for me, and I had lot of people who contributed to this journey of last 3 years as I took on the administration. A lot of them are here on the dais, the past deans, the current leadership, my colleagues. Some of them, when I took on, said that, Muna, it is a moment of self-governance and we will do it together. And that gave me a lot of confidence, and they stood by me all the time. One beautiful thing about Faculty of Planning, which someone told me was called Faculty of Problems. The beautiful thing about it is our meetings last for 2 to 3 hours. And I love it because everybody has something to say, because everybody has a sense of ownership to that department, a sense of ownership to the students, a sense of ownership to what we are doing, and because of which they are making their points. The moment it turns into silence, I think it will be a very, very difficult situation to be in. And therefore, I see a lot of strength in this diversity of views that we have amongst colleagues. We have really decided to agree to disagree on many things. But all of us have common ethos, and those are to give students the best, be whatever situation we are in, as Barjor said, you know, that they never passed on whatever they were going through to the students. So whatever situation we are in, the best to be given to the students. The thought is, how do we bring the best talent to the university? How do we bring best expertise onto the campus, so on and so forth. And that's what has kept us going, and I think that's what will keep us going. Whoever comes in this position, I think there's something very fundamental which has been sown into this place. The value system is so strong. Even if we carry forward that, I think that is good enough. So that was the sentiment with which I continued. And that was my journey. And the feeling almost was like, you know, how Dhoni would have felt when he was probably made the captain of the team, which had Sachin Tendulkar, which had Rahul Dravid, which had Saurav Ganguly. I don't know who's who there, but there were lots of them. But I think then as a team we worked well, and that's the strength of Faculty of Planning, and that's something which we want to convey to the students, to the future generations, and that's something we have learned from our past. We stand in the present and we pass on to the future. So that's the kind of sentiment we have, and that's the kind of sentiment we work with our students. For this entire event, the student council, we never had to tell them or remind them even once about the kind of things they were doing. That was the kind of ownership they had in everything that they put together, that you see outside, that you see here, and they have been at it. And that's the beauty which we have sort of got in legacy and which we plan to carry on. The last point that I would like to make is about the future of urban habitats. I don't want to reflect on how habitats would look like, whether we respond to climate change, we respond to, all those things are better said in the classrooms. But what I see, and when I zoom into last 10 years, having engaged with the students, seen very closely what are the kind of issues they are grappling with when they are here as well as when they go out. The constant struggle in their heads, which comes back to us, is, do we specialize or we generalize? And that probably was never in our heads when we were studying, but that's something which students constantly struggle with. The market sometimes gives a signal that you need to specialize, sometimes it says you need to be a generalist, and I think that's something we will have to collectively work towards, that while being a specialist is a good idea, but a generalist who has a good understanding of the city, its society, how it functions, who are the stakeholders, how is it governed, financed, how the projects are developed, how the plans are prepared. a planner probably is supposed to know a bit of all of that before he or she decides to deep dive into anything. So this question of generalist, specialist continues, but I don't think we can believe that we are super specialists when we graduate immediately after 2 years. We are still finding ourselves. We've just got a direction. Probably we will redirect on the way. And that's where I see. And therefore, how future ready are our planners will depend on how they wade through this multidimensionality, multidisciplinarity of planning, and how well they take it forward, how well we are able to enable that. And the second thing is about how planner ready are our cities. Other challenge that most of the planners are facing is the mainstream recognition of planning as a profession, and how recognized is planning as a profession in all circles, be it consulting, government, non-government, development agencies. There are some areas where people really know what planners bring on platter, but there are areas where people don't know. So that's something we collectively need to work on as we move ahead in coming, say, 10 to 15 years. So these were just last 5 to 7 years of struggles which the budding planners face and have brought on board. So this has been my journey and reflections, and it's really, really humbling to see my teachers here, to see past graduates, friends, and people present online. So it's really a humbling experience. Thank you.
Don't go away, Mona. We have about 10 minutes for which we have reflections from the audience. It's best that you moderate that, so keep that as a reflection. Don't think the panel's ready for questions. Questions could be outside. Spoil their tea, but let's keep to the plan.
I think my colleagues are very well placed to do that. Sejal, Sashwat, pick someone you think we would want to hear from. Shravan, please.
Hi, Bimal, Professor Christopher, and all the former deans in the dais. I left SEPT 2015, but I always get attracted to this place. So when Mona wrote to me, that there is a celebration of 50 years, I thought I have to come here. For me, SEPT, I don't see SEPT as a professional institution. I see SEPT as an educational institution. Therefore, for me, the role of SEPT has been much more wider than just getting professional degree and solving problem. I think to some extent, yeah, multidisciplinarity has been there. When I came to this place, I have told this thing many times. I didn't know the difference between architecture and engineering. In the mountains where I come from, the engineer used to design the building. Even now they do that. So when I came to this place, I first time knew the difference between architecture and engineering. And now invariably, whenever I go to any place, I only take photographs of building, but I can't interpret that. You see? So what I'm trying to tell you is that I see this as an educational institution which has much more larger vision and much more larger objective than just giving me a professional degree. And what do I mean by that? I think it, to a certain extent, multidisciplinarity and other thing humanizes you. It teaches you to see other people's perspective, to be more tolerant, and also to take a stand. I think these are some of the values which I very deeply feel I learned from this place. Because for the first time when you meet an architect, and let me tell you in a lighter mode, when the architect comes to a studio for the first time, he feels he is the king, because he knows the space much better than many other social scientists does, and I was a social scientist. But then, over a period of time, each of one of us learned to tolerate and appreciate each other's view. And that I have seen that. So in that sense, I think, for me, this place is much more larger than just a professional institution. Therefore, I value this place. And therefore, I come to this place again and again because I learn a lot from the, my colleagues who are still here. I still chase them as my colleagues, though I've left this place, and also the students. The other thing which I think I need to share is, this is more to do about, the new education policy that people have been talking about. I was lucky enough to study in Santiniketan, which Tagore, started. And then, of course, when I came to this campus today, Sivanand told me I was wearing the shirt, and he said, "You are really looking like a color of JNU." But what I'm trying to tell you is that I think these two places, the value, I'm talking in the context of new education policy, and Tagore, JNU, and SEPT. I think if you look into the new educational policy today, all what we are doing, all these three institutions, though two of them are bigger, and SEPT is much smaller, but it exactly does what is the main objective of new education policy. It talks about interdisciplinarity, it talks of values, it talks about practice, and it talks about embeddedness of education. So therefore, I think I would not, I had a lot to say, but these are the two things I would just like to share, and these two things I think I learned from this place, and I value it very much, and I'll continue to do so. Thank you very much, Mona, for bringing us here.
Anyone, please.
Absolutely amazing evening, and I'm delighted to be here, seeing all of you, teachers, friends, seniors, colleagues, everyone. Where Shravan left. So when we are in school, we recite where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. When you come on campus, you realize that what it means to be here. SEPT is a place which teaches you to be able to live it, agree to disagree, and with all the informality, the clutter that we see on the surface, is a solid foundation. So this is the banyan tree, which is growing, banyan tree at 50, and we are hoping for an amazing 100, 150, 200 years to come. Thank you.
That was Swati Kothari, 97-99 batch, probably. And she's right now teaching at Nirma University. Before that, we had Shravan. Most of us know Shravan, but for the students now, Professor Shravan Acharya was our teacher here, and he moved on to JNU in 2015. So while they decide which batch, maybe we have other colleagues, Aloki, Rini, Kaushik Bhai, Dr. Ray, so many of us. I think Professor Prasant Day is here, and the younger alumni, whoever, please. Imani. Or you want us to come and hand over the... Please just tell your batch, your name, so that the current students know you well.
I am Lokendra. They call me Loki here. That's what they always did. I joined planning in 92, cleared in 94. And it's wonderful to see so many of our faculties and everyone here. बहुत लोगों के साथ बहुत चाय पिए कैंटीन पे. So it used to be great. This is a fantastic campus. When I came here in 84 in architecture, I saw those unplastered buildings and I thought the construction is yet to be finished. So, SEPT kind of breaks all your norms, all your framework of reference, and makes you re-look at things. And that's what it has always been. I made a new me. I found a new me through SEPT, and we've been very blessed to be able to reinvent ourselves every time. SEPT has done fantastic teaching. I did my architecture and planning here, and we learned so much, tremendous amount of things. And after so many years, more than 2 decades of planning, when I look back, I think we've done a fantastic job of teaching, planning really. A little rethought when India is at a junction where we are relooking at ourselves, we are relooking at our culture. It's like a renaissance in India right now. And when I see the old city of Ahmedabad, which is probably 600 years old, has never had flooding, and I see flooding the new cities, I think we need to take a pause and probably relook at those things. That how can we be doing planning along with nature, respecting nature, because there is no power bigger than that. And that's what I think my learning is today. And that's what I would like to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Loki. Loki also has something called tree walks. And I think he would be the right person to come help us put the banyan tree on campus. So we'll reach you for that. The students had already decided that. Dr. Ray and...
I think everybody is serious. I want to be not so serious at all. I came here in SEPT in May '86 to give my interview as professor here. And I was coming from Lucknow those days. And I went to the small canteen that we had those days and asked for a lunch. And he gave me some chapatis, some rice, and aloo ka sabji. And I tried to eat it, and then I almost feeling like vomiting because the aloo ka sabji mein so much of sugar has been given, I cannot imagine. So then I asked how I'll eat. I want to eat these chapatis. So then he says, I can give you green chili and little bit of onion. So I said, give me that. He said, I'm hungry, I want to eat it. So that was my first experience in SEPT. Another experience that I would never forget was that one day I was teaching in the class. It's a course called Indian Society, and I was talking about the caste system. There was a student who was graduate from School of Architecture here. He stood up and says, whatever you are talking, these are all useless because we are in a modern India, we are in urban India, there is nothing like caste. So please don't say something which is not at all relevant. And that was at the fag end of the class. So I said, now there is no time to discuss about it, so let us wait. In the next class, we'll be discussing it. Then I was thinking what to do, I have to satisfy this student because I'm talking about this subject and it's my moral responsibility. Then the morning of the next class, I found I have Times of India of last 2 months. And I just found one Sunday issue, and there are matrimonial columns in that. So I quickly took out all the Sunday editions and gave it to each student to read in the class. And the one answer they have to give me, whether you find any casteism out of reading this matrimonial. With one condition, don't look for groom or bride from this for you. And believe me, this was almost 3 hours exercise. And that student finally said, yes, now I change my statement. And I say, yes, there is caste in India. And another thing which I am really thankful to School of Planning, SEPT, that right in the first year, I was allowed to work with another very learned professor, very great human being, who is no more here, Professor B.N. Vishwanath, to start what we call the rural studies, rural lab. And you know what was the first village I went with Dr. Vishwanath? Was Thaltej. In 1986, and believe me, Thaltej was 100% rural that time. So I'm really thankful to School of Planning for that. It gives me an opportunity to use my personal experience of being a person who was born in a remote village in Hooghly district in West Bengal, and use that as well as my professional work, my PhD was in rural planning, to use it among the student, and gradually I think that studio became quite popular, because even when I meet a student of those days, the first thing they remember to tell that the village they went in. Thank you, planning, School of Planning.
Thank you. Bimal?
So, thank you very much. I'm not going to reflect on, I'm going to sort of end up by talking a few things about CEPT and the journey ahead for Faculty of Planning as I see it. It's a truly remarkable institution, CEPT. We all know that. It's an incredible collaboration between the industrialists of Ahmedabad, between professionals, and supported by government, but essentially a civil society organization of a remarkable sort, going on since 50 years through the effort of lots of people. And so first of all of the people who have helped found, build, teach at, nurture the Faculty of Planning at CEPT University. On behalf of CEPT, thank you very much for the role that you have played. It's really ultimately the people who make the institution, and we have had a remarkable set of people come here and nurture this place, not just water once, but continuously nurture this place, and that's what's made CEPT what it is. So that's very positive thing. It's also an institution that has survived. Right in the beginning, I think Trideep mentioned that it's an institution that has survived, started in the 60s at the time when everybody was very enthusiastically setting up new institutions to transform the country. And while not many are still, sort of as alive as they were when they were started, CEPT continues to be an extremely important institution. And the simple reason is that CEPT has been changing. Anything that stays static dies, and CEPT has been continually changing, and I think that's essentially why it survives. If it doesn't change, it's not going to. But the journey ahead is going to require even more change than we have seen, because India is changing very, very fast up. If you think of how static things were for 30, 40 years, first 30, 40 years of CEPT, and how they started, sort of, the things started moving and changing after the 90s, after India liberalized, after it accepted more. It's become more dynamic, it's been changing. Some of us have been part of that more recent transformation of the institution. It's going to change even more. So we are going to have to be open for even more change. And let me tell you, while we all will agree that yes, change, but that's one of the most difficult things for an institution to do. Everybody agrees that there should be change, but everybody else should change, not me. And how I do things should remain the way they are. Everybody else should change. And it becomes, it's a difficult task in an institution to keep sort of transforming. Companies, I also had a company, a consulting company. Companies, if they don't change, they will die. Very simple. And there is a great pressure from outside, from the market. If you don't keep evolving, if you don't keep changing, you won't get business and you will die. So there's something automatic, something external that, but educational institutions have no such pressure. The students who come in are naive. They have no idea of what they're getting. They're all quite happy to get whatever they get. And by the time they figured out what they got was outdated, they're out of here. So students don't bring that pressure. Teachers don't bring that pressure by themselves. They have to generate their own. I mean, institutions have to generate their own sort of pressure for change. That's where leadership counts a lot, because unless you have a changing leadership, you won't get change in an institution. That's 100% sure. And that is something that has to be institutionalized. I think we have a whole series of deans who all brought their own different visions. They were the impetus for change, and that's going to have to be even more. 2 or 3, 4 big challenges in front of the Faculty of Planning as we go ahead. And I just say this sort of this open-ended thinking. I think Pradeep already mentioned that India is or let me put it this way. Two things that I didn't go to planning at CEPT. I'm not a planner from CEPT. And therefore, perhaps when I came back after my planning studies, I could see CEPT as an outsider, not as an insider, as a person who, I wasn't trained in the CEPT way of thinking. I was trained in a different way of thinking. I'd say 2 things that were to me very unusual when I came here and looked at that after my studies. One was, I studied all my planning in the US at University of California, Berkeley. And when I did my PhD planning theory exam, the standard question that you would have to answer, any planner would have to answer, is when is planning justified? In the US, this was very straightforward. The reigning philosophy was that markets function reasonably well. If you leave people to do their own thing, they will sort out most of their problems, as they have done for millennia. But markets sometimes fail. And those are instances where planners can justifiably step in. So the standard answer you had to give in your planning theory was, when is planning justified? And you had to write down what the market failures were. And you had to explain, okay, this is when I am allowed to do some planning. I came back to India and I found it was completely the opposite. There were people here who were saying, when are markets justified? When should we allow people to do what they should? When should we give them, when should we allow them to innovate without permission? When should we allow them to set up businesses of their own? The assumption here was everything needs to be planned. Absolutely everything top down needs to be planned. You need to understand the needs of everybody, predict the needs of everybody, provide for them in some way. And indeed, School of Planning here was very much part of that philosophy. Okay, this is just the way it was. India was like that. We had Professor Y.K. Alag. He was a doyen of the Planning Commission. He was, if anybody, the kind of person who understood what top-down planning means. And School of Planning here was very much part of that. And that journey away from a sort of disregard for markets, or as Fatak Saab put it, as any market is the enemy, or that markets, to the journey where we work with markets rather than as opposed to markets. That journey still remains to be done. I think we have still not figured out. So that's one big task ahead of us. I think the second thing that remains is, I remember coming 10, 15 years ago maybe to a NOSPLAN gathering here and asking a set of students that were gathered in that, there was a lecture, and I asked them, I said, how many of you believe that your plans are going to be implemented? because India has, every city has a plan. And planners have made it, nobody else. Sometimes, very often, the planners from CEPT who have made it. But there are very few cities where you will say the plan is implemented. And that's a fact. And so I asked the students, how many of you believe that you're, and these are students from all across the country, of course, they're not all CEPT students. And I was astounded when nobody would say that they believed that their plans would be implemented. They were going to embark on a career in planning, make plans, and not convinced that their plans are going to be implemented. I mean, and I asked them the question, why is that so? Why do you believe that? And they gave the standard two complaints. Politics, these politicians get in the way, and that is why plans don't get implemented. And they say we have no resources. So resource constraints and politics is what stops planning. And that I thought was very, very astounding in a sense. I said, if you go to an aeronautical engineering school and some student is making a model aeroplane and you ask him, is your plane going to fly? And he says, and the student says, no, I don't think the plane is going to fly. So you ask him why, and he says, gravity, sir, gravity. If there was no gravity, the plane would fly. And it seemed to me that the answers they were giving of politics and lack of resources were an excuse like that. Because you cannot wish away politics in a democracy, and you cannot wish away lack of resources. There is always going to be that. And yet your planning has to work. So Indian planning has to change so that we are able to work within the context that we have. Our cities are growing. There are lots of serious problems. If we are hoping to be part of the solution, then we have to figure out ways of making plans that work. So that journey also remains a little bit to be done. I think the School of Planning also needs to deepen a lot its research output, a lot more than it is today. We need to, we are a great teaching institution, I think. We're really good. But I think the research work that we do at the Faculty of Planning, and I wouldn't single out the Faculty of Planning, I'd say across CEPT, that remains a big task to be done. So I thought, everybody was having fun saying nice things, and I was saying, okay, there's a big journey ahead of us, which is also very, very difficult. It's going to be difficult, and but Mona said the right thing. If it's not difficult, what's the fun in it? So with that, let me stop and once again end by once again thanking all the leadership of Faculty of Planning, founder of Faculty of Planning, all the staff members, past, present, who have contributed to this, all the students who have been here. Thank you very much for making this a great place, and perhaps the only institution in the country that will be able to take on the difficult challenges that face all our cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now invite the student volunteer to thank Bimal and invite Shashwat. It's a complicated thing, right? So please come.
Thank you for your kind and insightful words, sir. Now we'd request Professor Shashwat Bandyopadhyay to come on stage to end this memorable evening with a vote of thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I thought Bimal has already given vote of thanks. I'm Shashwat from 93-95 batch, and when I was asked to give this vote of thanks, and when I was just entering campus this morning, I thought I knew a lot about CEPT because almost 30 years around, and then I went to this morning reflections with all our past and present dean, and then I realized I knew so little about it. The struggle, the journey, the value system. And when we came here, I think Christopher was not here. We have been hearing his work in Bhutan because our studio went to Sikkim. But then we had faculty members like Prem, Pangotra, who was our director. Actually, those days they are not called deans, they were directors. And the head of the institution, I think, was called dean that time. So we came in almost a kind of a new system where faculties are calling each other by name, not by sir, or, and then you can walk in. We had a lot of malarial outbreak, went to complain to our director. He said, look at my cabin. It was a bare bone cabin, no windows, no system like that. But then the institute grew on us, and we all started working together. First as a student, then I went out and came back as a faculty and worked with them. So it's a great pleasure and honor for me to thank them. But on a lighter note, I realized one thing which Barjor just lightly mentioned. When we were a student and I came back here as a faculty, one thing common, most of our past director, they all owned a scooter those days. And that scooter brand was, I think, Activa nahi, Kinetic. All form of colors, white, black, each one of them, except for, I think, Prashant and Dinesh and Meera. Dinesh and Meera's scooter was very peculiar, that Sholay type, sidecar kind of scooter and other thing. So I was just thinking, and I was just about to tell Rutul Joshi, Rutul, don't blame us. Our gurus never actually tried cycle. They were actually using scooter. So I think that's one very important. The second aspect, what we always enjoyed, walking to their houses. I remember there was some cricket match. We all went and bombarded with Prashant Day, C.N. Ray, and many a times. And that kind of camaraderie that we all shared. So it's a great honor and pleasure to thank all our founding members, past deans and directors. Most importantly, our founding member, Christopher Benninger, and I heard a lot about this morning, the journey of, starting the institute from almost kind of nowhere and building it slowly over the period, and that struggle continued. And also all our deans and directors shared their journey over a period of time, and I think this is a very, very valuable, enlightening journey. So when I came back out of this hall today and in the morning, I was just thinking that it must be documented, because every institute actually need to document this journey for the kind of future coming ahead. And those challenges will remain, like the generalization versus specialization, or market, working with market, or preventing market to kind of come to us, and then probably over a period of time we'll debate and sort them out. So first of all, let me thank Dr. Bimal Patel, President of CEPT University, and I see Bimal has shared two very important milestones in Faculty of Planning's journey. When he joined, it was Faculty of Planning 40th year, and today is Faculty of Planning 50 year, FPF 50. Hopefully we'll be able to see you again in FPF 60. So, and let me also thank together, because I know we have to stop at 5.12. So that's the agenda says. So let me thank Professor Christopher Benninger, our deans who could not join us today, and Professor Vishwanath, Professor Robin Ganguly. We had a little chance to work with him in Calcutta before. Professor Dinesh and Meera Mehta, Professor Prem Pangotra. Prem was our favorite director because he solved a lot of our problems. And then Barjor came in, and Barjor was very, very, he was kind of a rock star teacher. Half our class were actually, he had hair, that's true. Really? Okay. Actually, he had a mustache also, I think. Yes. And he had a very innovative way of teaching, that he took whole class to CG Road, one market corner, say, now study this. Or Thaltej. Thaltej was incidentally a village. And also the rural module, we were sent to a village. We didn't have any access, some state transport buses. And we reached there, we survived, came back, thanks to all of their. And I must also thank Professor Shivanand Swami, because he was the one who actually started opening up, inviting past students to come and join here. Professor Shivanand, Professor Utpal Sharma, Professor Darshini Mahadevia, and also Professor Phatak. And I will not say much about my colleague, Professor Mona, but I must thank, because I'll thank her in FP60, then we can reflect it better. But I must thank Mona for her leadership and also all the students. And it was, in the last 2 days, so much of excitement. People are coming in, saying that give this bites and do this thing. So much of, fun, and great to see them wearing all white. Only the faculty and founding members are wearing black today. So I see all the students. Thank you very much for making this event very, very successful. And also, last but not least, Professor Trideep for hosting the entire event along with all other members of the administration. Thank you, and over to you.
Make your life a little simpler. The formal part of the program's over. We invite you for tea, which is outside. And on your left is the well, the kund, where there's going to be photographs. And it's going to be chaotic. There is no order in which the photographs are going to be taken. That's what I was instructed. So as many people as they can fit in a frame, they will get themselves photographed and move to tea. Thank you very much. Thank you.